The morning always began before daylight for Ethan Carter. While most of the city was still asleep, he quietly stepped into the kitchen of his small apartment and started preparing breakfast. Pancakes or cereal were a luxury they couldn't always afford, so most mornings it was toast, eggs, and fruit whenever it fit the budget. After packing lunch for his 8-year-old son, Liam, Ethan gently knocked on the bedroom door. "Rise and shine, buddy," he said with a warm smile. Liam rubbed his eyes and grinned. "5 more minutes?" "You said that yesterday?" Ethan laughed. Their mornings were simple, filled with small conversations that made their tiny home feel rich with love. Ever since Liam's mother passed away 4 years earlier, Ethan had become both father and mother to his son. He learned how to braid hair when Liam wanted to help his cousin, attended every school event, and never missed bedtime stories, no matter how exhausting work had been. After dropping Liam at school, Ethan drove to the neighborhood garage where he had spent more than a decade repairing cars. His coveralls were stained with grease, and his hands carried countless tiny scars from years of honest labor. To strangers, he looked like an ordinary mechanic. To the people who truly knew him, he was the kind of man who stayed late to help stranded drivers without charging extra and often repaired vehicles for struggling families at little or no profit. That rainy afternoon, a luxury SUV suddenly rolled into the garage with steam rising from beneath the hood. The driver stepped out confidently, dressed in an elegant cream-colored business suit that seemed untouched by the weather. It was Victoria Hayes, the successful CEO of a powerful technology company. She looked around the modest garage with visible disappointment before her eyes settled on Ethan. "So you're the mechanic?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, ma'am," Ethan replied politely. "I'll inspect the problem right away." Victoria crossed her arms impatiently. "Please don't scratch the paint. This vehicle costs more than most houses." Ethan ignored the remark and focused on the engine. Within 40 minutes, he diagnosed a failed fuel pump and carefully completed the repair. When he explained what had happened and handed her the bill, Victoria barely glanced at him. "I expected better service," she said flatly. "People running places like this should learn professionalism." The words stung, but Ethan didn't argue. He simply wished her a safe drive. That evening, while eating dinner with Liam, the little boy noticed his father unusually quiet. "Did something happen today?" Liam asked. Ethan smiled gently before answering. "Sometimes people judge others by what they wear or the job they do. Never make the same mistake, son. Respect costs nothing, but it can mean everything." Liam nodded thoughtfully, unaware that those simple words would soon be tested in a way neither of them could have imagined. 3 days passed, and Ethan hardly thought about the unpleasant encounter at the garage. There were engines to repair, bills to pay, and a little boy waiting for him every evening with stories from school. Life had taught him that holding on to insults only made difficult days even heavier. He chose to move forward instead. On Saturday afternoon, Ethan and Liam were shopping for groceries when his phone rang. The caller ID showed the city hospital. "Mr. Carter?" a nurse asked urgently. "We're trying to locate people with your rare blood type. A young girl has been brought in after a serious accident. She has lost a dangerous amount of blood, and you're one of the closest registered donors." Ethan looked at Liam for a moment. "Is it an emergency?" he asked. "Yes, every minute matters." Without asking who the patient was or whether the family could repay him, Ethan agreed immediately. "Tell them I'm on my way." A neighbor offered to watch Liam while Ethan rushed to the hospital. The emergency department was crowded with doctors, nurses, and worried relatives. Everyone moved quickly, yet the atmosphere was filled with tension. After completing the routine health checks, Ethan lay quietly on the donation chair as the blood collection began. He watched the dark red line fill the bag and silently hoped it would be enough to save a life. A doctor approached him afterward. "Mr. Carter, your donation arrived just in time. You've given this young patient a much better chance." Ethan smiled with relief. "I'm glad I could help. I hope she recovers." As he walked toward the exit, he noticed a familiar voice echoing through the hallway. "My daughter! Please save my daughter!" a woman cried through tears. Ethan turned and froze. Standing outside the intensive care unit was Victoria Hayes. Her expensive suit was wrinkled, her makeup streaked by tears, and the confidence she once carried had completely disappeared. She looked nothing like the proud CEO who had mocked him only days before. One of the nurses quietly spoke to Victoria. "We found a compatible donor at the last moment. His blood has already been transfused." Victoria clasped her hands together in gratitude. "Please, I need to thank him." When she turned and saw Ethan standing a few steps away, her face went pale. The realization struck instantly. The man who had saved her daughter's life was the same mechanic she had judged, dismissed, and humiliated without a second thought. Ethan stood quietly in the hospital corridor, unsure whether to stay or leave. He had never donated blood expecting recognition. For him, saving a life was simply the right thing to do. He picked up his jacket and started walking toward the exit, hoping the young girl would recover quickly. "Please, wait." Victoria's trembling voice stopped him. He turned slowly. The confident executive who had looked down on him just days earlier now stood before him with tears in her eyes. Her shoulders shook as she struggled to find the right words. "Was it you?" she asked softly. "Were you the one who donated blood for my daughter?" Ethan gave a small nod. "The hospital called because our blood types matched. That's all." Victoria lowered her head, unable to meet his eyes. "I don't deserve your kindness after the way I treated you." For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence felt heavier than any apology. Finally, Ethan broke it with calm honesty. "I didn't donate blood for you. I donated it for a little girl who needed help. Children shouldn't suffer because adults make mistakes." Those words struck Victoria harder than any accusation ever could. Just then, the doctor entered the waiting area with a gentle smile. "Mrs. Hayes, your daughter is stable now. The transfusion was successful and her condition is improving." Victoria covered her face as tears of relief streamed down her cheeks. For the first time in hours, she could breathe again. "Thank you," she whispered, looking first at the doctor and then at Ethan. A few minutes later, she gathered enough courage to speak again. "I owe you more than an apology." Ethan shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. Just be there for your daughter when she wakes up." Before leaving, he received a phone call from Liam. "Dad, is everything okay?" the little boy asked. Ethan smiled. "Everything's going to be fine. Someone needed help today, and I was lucky enough to give it." Liam replied proudly, "I knew you'd help. That's what Mom always said good people do." Ethan's eyes filled with emotion. The next morning, Victoria couldn't stop thinking about the mechanic she had mocked. She realized that the man she had judged by his worn clothes possessed a character that money, status, and success could never buy. She made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Not because she felt guilty, but because she wanted to become the kind of person her daughter could one day admire. The following Monday, Ethan arrived at the garage expecting another ordinary day. He rolled up the doors, organized his tools, and began working on an old pickup truck that belonged to one of his regular customers. The familiar sound of engines and clinking metal filled the workshop, making the weekend at the hospital feel like a distant memory. Around mid-morning, a sleek black sedan pulled into the parking lot. Everyone in the garage looked up as Victoria Hayes stepped out, this time dressed far more simply than before. There was no confident stride, no impatient expression, and no phone pressed against her ear. She walked directly toward Ethan, holding a small envelope in her hands. The mechanics exchanged curious glances, remembering how she had spoken to Ethan only days earlier. Victoria stopped in front of him and took a slow breath. "I came here to say something I should have said the first time we met." The garage fell silent. "I'm sorry." Her voice was steady but filled with genuine regret. "I judged you because of your job, your clothes, and this place. Then, when my daughter needed a miracle, the person who saved her life was the very man I had treated with disrespect." Ethan wiped his hands on a clean cloth and offered a gentle smile. "Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them." Victoria handed him the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, not a check. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said. "Money could never repay what you did, so I wrote this instead." Ethan folded the letter carefully without reading it immediately. A few moments later, Victoria's daughter, Emily, stepped out of the car holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. She walked shyly toward Ethan. "My mom told me you helped save my life," she said. "Thank you." Ethan accepted the flowers with a warm smile. "You don't owe me thanks. Just promise you'll grow up to be kind to everyone you meet." Emily nodded. "I promise." As Victoria watched her daughter smile again, she understood that true greatness had nothing to do with wealth, titles, or expensive cars. It was measured by compassion, humility, and the willingness to help others without expecting anything in return. From that day forward, she became one of the garage's most loyal customers, not because Ethan needed her business, but because she wanted to support someone whose character had taught her the most valuable lesson of her life. Moral: never judge a person's worth by their appearance, profession, or financial status. Kindness, humility, and compassion reveal a person's true value, and the respect you give to others often returns when you need it most.